You know, it doesn't matter what size of bag that you're carrying or what time period. It really doesn't matter. At some point, you're going to have to figure out how you're going to carry it all. Where are you going to position it on your body? Now, when we go back to the continental time period, which we'll discuss here in a little bit, you know, the options in regards to the ergonomics of everything were pretty limited. You know, you had bedroll system, you had knapsacks, you had market wallets, things like that, that you would use to carry your load wherever you're going, right? Then we get into the early 20th century, and people are taking military haversacks like this, going out for weekends. I mean, after all, how much do you really need to go camping? You don't need a whole lot. In the 1800s, you got Nesmik. Nesmik was like the first to really, at least in a broad sense, really publicize and discuss lightweight camping. Now, he was ill. He just couldn't carry that much weight, so it was kind of a necessity for him. But it did start the discussion in the 20th century about what do you really need to go outdoors and enjoy it, you know, for enjoyment's sake. Now, when we take a look at this Kelty, for example, this is a newer Kelty pack, and we look at all the straps and all the functions that you can, you know, do with this thing compared to even like a Trapper Nelson pack, which is what's over here. You know, it's mind-boggling. All the different adjustments that you can make, and even today, you can make more. You know, we got internal frame packs. This is an external. I prefer external frames, but it goes to show the plethora of ways to carry things. But in general, some of it really just stays the same. You know, we can come up with new materials. We can come up with different ways to tie things down, different anchoring points, things like that. But when we get to the root of it all, what is really necessary for camping, right? And I love that about living history. I love taking a look at the material culture, whether it was the material culture of my lifetime, material culture of my grandfather's lifetime, or the culture of even farther back. And we can take all those ideas, boil it down to the root of it, and we find out that we really don't have as much difference as what we really have in common. And I think that actually speaks true for society overall if we boil everything down to the most basic points, okay? So let's clear off this table because we're going to talk about positioning of your bag and considerations and some historical solutions to those problems. You don't see very many continental reenactors using this type of pack. Most continental reenactors, they use the new model, new Army knapsack, etc. I've heard it called different things. But this was basically the first style of knapsack that the Continental Army had access to and used. Now, we'll make another video because this is an unfinished pack. I still got to paint it, I still got to dye the leather of it, but the functionality is still there, so it doesn't really matter for the sake of this video. I'll also say that with my 18th century living history impression, with my research and things like that, some things are just conjecture. And I will try to tell you what is conjecture just based off of, you know, similarities with like the British Army or the French Army or what they had access before during the French and Indian War and what might have carried over to the War of the American Revolution or War of American Independence. But when it comes to this pack, you don't hold a lot. The average infantry soldier carried about 60 pounds of gear, and that includes their musket and the rounds and everything else. Now, my grandfather, Edward Dyer, he was part of the light infantry. Now, the light infantry they were a specialized unit. They were special forces in a way, but not in the same way as like the Green Berets, Navy SEALs, or things like that. However, to be part of the light infantry early on, you kind of had to meet certain requirements such as fitness and height and strength and able to move fast and quick. Now, the average infantry soldier might have marched about 20 miles on a really good day. Light infantry was expected to march up to 24, possibly even more, miles per day, and they had to do it quickly. So maneuverability and weight kind of plays into that whole system. So when it comes down to the pack, especially as a light infantry soldier, when you're at an advance of the main line, and sometimes you're out on scouting parties, you're on reconnaissance, you're foraging, you're maybe in the rear guard, vanguard, whatever, it doesn't matter. You're kind of detached from the main line. So you had to come prepared with whatever you need to basically live out of for a period of time, right? But that comes with food, and that comes with bedding and clothes and things like that. So this right here is a double bag, if you will. It's an envelope style sort of knapsack. So it has a front pocket, it has a back pocket, and you can see how wide it is, how deep it is, and this is fully packed. Okay, now this weighs about 10 pounds as is. And all I've got in here is a blanket. I've got my painted ground cloth. I have an extra shirt and 2 pairs of socks. And I think I have my, my grooming kit in here as well. So that in itself weighs 10 pounds. Now, I've got all my other gear, including my haversack, which includes my kitchen, basically. So it has my food, it has all my other basic personal belongings that would not fit in here. I have my musket, I have my cartridge box, I have my bayonet, if I had a bayonet, and I have my tomahawk. I have all these other different things, and they're dangling off of me, and I'm carrying them in a very specific way. So when you're going long miles, whether you're hiking, you're backpacking, you're doing living history or whatever, where you position things on your body really matters. So this doesn't give you a whole lot of options, does it? It's just a single sling. So I can wear it as a haversack. As you can kind of see here, I just drape it across my shoulder. Of course, this would be oriented towards the back of the body, still positioned high on my back. Okay, now this is going to be a lot more comfortable to carry a load over a long distance versus being lower on my back. So being high on your back is going to be really important. Now, if I don't want to carry it like this, and keep in mind, I do have other straps all over me. So this is not going to be very comfortable for a long period of time because I already have so much pulling on my neck. So the next best thing is to put it across my shoulders. Now, as you can see, this is my pack placed across my shoulders. Now, it looks kind of goofy, but it is pretty practical. I don't have that pulling on my neck just like everything else, so it alleviates that. I can still maneuver, if I had my gun, but it is restrictive. I'm not able to bring it up all the way without it choking me, okay? So if you're not fighting, if you're going for a march, this could be okay for a period of time. But let's explore one other option that was popular even in the early 20th century and carries over today, especially on the boundary waters, and that's called the tump line. Now this is the tump line. It looks even goofier, but indigenous peoples for who knows how long, just about every human group is familiar with carrying a load somewhat like this. No one group can really claim the use of the tump line, because every human society has always had to carry a burden, and eventually this just kind of came to fruition, right? But we do know that the indigenous peoples, the Native Americans here, they used the tump line to carry their various loads. And we can see from other cultures throughout human history that they also did the same thing. So this is the tump line. Now, how you wear it is you put it right above your hairline, right? You don't want it on the top of your crown. You don't want it compressing your spine. And if you put it too much low, it's going to put a lot of pressure on your head and can lead to headaches. So you're trying to think of a middle ground right about here, almost at the top of my head, but not quite. Now, I feel the pressure, but it's not pressure that's pushing down on my spine. It's not pressure that's on my shoulders. It's not pressure on my neck. It's more or less like an awkward pressure just on my head. Now, after a long period of time, this also gets tiring. So you need to take a break from it and adjust it in some way or another. But when you're carrying a load with the tump line, you would kind of lean forward and you would line up your body. When you do that, your shoulders itself takes up a tremendous amount of the weight. So really, it's kind of a balance. Does it look awkward? I'm sure it does. Does it feel awkward? Honestly, No, especially when you're going for a hike. If you're actually moving and you're walking, you don't really even notice it. It's just a different way and style of walking. Now, again, this is only about 10 pounds. Now, indigenous peoples and people all around the world, they carry way more weight than just 10 pounds of weight using this method. But as a soldier, I've got everything else on my shoulders. I got everything else that's pulling on my neck. I got things that's around my waist. So I'm still carrying a tremendous amount of weight. This is just alleviating one portion of that weight so that my head and my back itself carries it. Now, how can we apply this to modern camping? If you're going for a trekking, especially like on canoe treks, we still have Duluth packs that use the tump line. Because you're going over long distances, you're carrying a bunch of weight. Generally speaking, less than 5 miles, but it could be a little bit longer depending on what portage or something else like you're like. But having a medium-sized weight, like 10 pounds, if you're just trying to shift some weight for a period of time, this could be a solution. I know many of us in especially bushcrafting community, outdoor community or whatever, we use haversacks. Oftentimes we overload those haversacks, but nonetheless, if you're going for a long hike and you're using a haversack, you can adjust your haversack in a way to carry that weight in that particular way, instead of just shifting it from shoulder to shoulder. So you can go a little bit longer distance with the gear that you have. So the tump line. If you've never heard of the tump line, well, now you have. If you've used the tump line, especially with some success, write down in the comments box below. Let us know what your farthest distance or in what application you use the tump line for. And we love to hear stories on this channel, so share away. Now, if you like this video, please click like because it helps other people find the video, and we really appreciate it. It helps this channel quite a bit. If you're not familiar with the press and mess kit, well, we've got the press and mess kit coming. You can secure yours for $200. Right now, Ish Enterprises is finishing up drawing out the cup. So we've got the skillet, the plate, the canteen, and the cap all lined up and figured out, but they're still working on trying to dial in that cup so it fits within the canteen and it clamshells like it should, like the press and mess kit originally did. Okay. Again, it's $200. We have 316L stainless steel, so you can use it on a fire, you can use it on a stove. Personally, I think it's the best one-man mess kit. Even Abercrombie and Fish and Antoine and Lungurki, they sold this kit. So if you got the rich people buying it, there's got to be some merit to it, right? But again, in the description box below, you can secure your own. My favorite part about it is you can clamshell the plate and the skillet together, and you got your baking dish. You've got a container to store something. It's pretty practical. I love it. I love it. Also, we're trying to start and build and create a museum for outdoor recreation. And we're talking about pre-colonization to modern times. American recreation. It's going to be the Smithsonian, if you will, of American recreation. But we need your help. Now, if you can contribute financially by joining the Campcrafters Guild in one of the various tiers, that's awesome. You can always join the Campcrafters Guild for free. Just Google Campcrafters Guild and join. It's a great community. We'd love to have you on there. But we also just need the word of mouth. And if you have expertise or you know somebody that has expertise, then, you can contribute that way. In the description box below, there's even a form, a Google form that you can fill out that, we can contact you when the time is right to follow up and see, if you really can help in one way or another. But again, we appreciate it. You can check it out at www.honorableoutfitters.com. Now, if you'd like to see a video about the press and mess kit, you can check it out here. If you'd like to see other videos about all the cool campcrafting gear, how to use it properly, and get the best use out of it, then check it out here. Hope you guys have a wonderful week. Give a kiss out to your loved ones, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.